mindfulness is being standing where you are, right here, right now, right? Without the charge of past emotions, right? Or without leaning into the future, and worrying about what's happening tomorrow. You can just be right here in the present moment. For myself, as I was moving into this space, it was very much about diffusing all of the past emotion, right? Because, most of the time we walk into every situation charged already. We're coming with a loaded cannon, so to speak, right? And then it's not even pertinent to what you're dealing with, right? So that's mindfulness, being able to be very present to what is around you, which makes you then, much more aware. You're taking in more information, right? If half of your awareness is pushed out front, like you're missing all this. See what I'm saying? So, to me, that's mindfulness. Being able to stand where you are.
And
I walk people out of their stories. Story is very seldom true, right? Maybe it has a pearl of truth in it. And when we're standing any place other than truth, you're going to have anxiety, right? So we get all tangled up in these stories that we create around this little pearl. So we get one tidbit of information, and pretty soon, like 2 seconds later, you have a whole story in your head, right? And it's not true. You don't know it to be true at that moment, right? So again, that's another mindfulness place, is to be able to stand where you are and say, no, that's not true. I don't know that today, right? Because, they say anything we identify with becomes solid, right? So if you're sitting here and you're worrying about something that might happen tomorrow, you're adding to that block after block to make that happen, right? Perfect example.
how is mindfulness specifically useful to survivors of?
It's very useful to survivors because we tend to be so hanging on to what happened before. We're experiencing our adversity as if it happened today, right? I mean, and all these stories have built and built and built, right? Until like you're trying to knock down a mausoleum, with walls this thick. You know what I'm saying? So yes, and most of it's not true because most of it happened when you were a child. So it's pushing all that away. And, a lot of, as well with the survivor, we have a lot of stories about what we wish we had and what we're trying to achieve with these people. And, what normal is. So there's just tons of stories that we have created to try to be able to fit into the world with the bucket that we came here with. So, and it's, learning to take back your choices, right? We've, survivors, thrivers, moving into that space of thriving. We quit making our choices a long time ago. So it's not like you suddenly become an adult and you like start making all those choices. You don't even know how, right? So, again, that place of mindfulness is coming back into that place of choice and responsibility and saying, hey, no, you're not going to make that choice for me. I'm going to make that, and I don't want to do that, and that's taking the responsibility away from them and putting it back in our seat, right? Because nobody can do anything to me today that I don't allow them to do. When I was 5, that wasn't true.
The story, when you're trapped in your story, does that kind of have power over you, and you need to...
It's your life, man.
Right.
It is your life, and that's how you see everything around you, right? Everything around you is turned upside down. Because if you're living with a narcissist and an abuser, you've learned to speak the other side of that language, right? That's how you communicate with the world. So it's not like you're going to leave them and walk out here and be able to communicate with a normal person. You're going to find that person that fits like this. It's like if you grew up in a house that spoke Russian, right? You're not going to suddenly walk over here and speak English. You're just not, right? You have to learn it. And so that's the process. And tearing down the story, then you can learn to show up in a different way, right? But then that gives us the power back, right? Because, it's our responsibility to show up differently, right?
And
I was asked numerous times, but to tell You know, my mother was on the other side of the door. You know, death was probably a few doors down from that, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? So that zippered lip. But at 17, I could have. My husband was a little bitty man, so, you know, it was just that power that he stood there with, you know, and that certainty was just like, boom. So that's how I got out of there. And then it was just quite a struggle because up to that point, I had almost complete amnesia. I had what they call complex PTSD, which is like this whole amnesia. And what you do remember, you've pieced together in a way that is so you can get up the next day, right? If your dad snuck into your bedroom that night, you have to get up and have breakfast. So you're going to piece that together in a way that is ambiguous, right? Usually you'd have the beginning and you'd have the end, and you may have something in the middle, but only enough to have that nag in your brain, right? Of like, oh, it doesn't feel right, but, you know. So when I got up here, I got pregnant with my first child, I started having flashbacks. And all these memories just started showing up. All this trauma just started showing up. And I didn't even know what to do with it. I mean, you talk about living in the present, I really was. Like a person with amnesia, if I met you today, I may not remember you tomorrow, but we're going to have a great time right now, right? That's how I lived. So to have all this flooding in, yeah, I felt like my world was just crashing. Like I didn't know what to do with it. And I had this baby coming, and I almost had a complete nervous breakdown at that point. Yeah, it was not good.
And at this point, you said you're living in the present because of this.
Yeah, I felt like my world was just crashing. Like I didn't know what to do with it. And I had this baby coming, and I almost all kinds of trauma. Like if you're trapped in your story, I want to walk you out. I love doing it, and probably one of the first things I do. See, that's kind of hard because it's different for everyone. But at the same time, one of the first things I do is I want to hear where they're charged. I want to hear what makes them cry and upset. And I want to hear how their relationships are. I want to hear if they're struggling in their relationships, because if they're struggling in relationship, let's see. Bottom line is I get them back home, right? I mean, I get them back home. Move them out of anxiety, move them out of overwhelm, you know, brush that stuff away. It's like cleaning out the closet, really. And it is amazing. It's like years just fall off their face, you know. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest comments of, you know, my clients that actually come to group and other people that have watched are like, you know, wow, uplifted, right? You know, and a lot of times people that are really struggling with circumstance are also having physical struggles as well. You know, be it sleep, be it food, you know, whatever, right? You know, and that is always a place for me to start looking as well, you know. So that's bottom line. I look for their knots, and intuitively, that's, you know, if somebody is telling me something, my train goes back to where it started. You know, if somebody's struggling with weight, where did that start? Did that start way back when somebody propped them up with a bottle and never got loved and touched during that time? You know, where did that start? You know, and then you kind of know how far you have to untangle it, because it's not like you have an incident like that and it's just, you know, concealed like a cyst in your body, right? It weaves into everything that happens after that. So you have to kind of start, and, you know, as they trigger, I usually keep people very contacted with me through this period. That's something I struggled with in therapy, was that you go in, they pick the scab raw, right? And then you'd walk out and you were left on your own. And so what'd you do? You put it back, you built it back, right? So I really encourage my people to, if something is rubbing, like, let's get on it, right? And then it happens really, really fast.
How people change when you're working with them?
Oh, they just start beaming. Like, they really do. And like I said, you know, you can tell that life is coming more in sync. They're not struggling, you know, to feed themselves. They're not struggling to, you know, with their physical issues. That stuff's kind of all falls away, right? Because it's symptoms of everything else, right? I mean, your bodies can only take so much. I had one little gal.
When you see the women that you work with and they just become this completely different person, you see them, you know, like come out of their story, like how does that make you feel?
Oh my gosh, so joyful. Like, I mean, if I didn't have to get paid for it, I wouldn't. If I didn't have to eat, I just wouldn't, because it just brings me so much joy. And truthfully, you know, it's in that space universally, you know, where Jesus says 2 or more are gathered. So I'm jumper cables, right? I don't usually always use the word because people get tangled in it, right? But at the same time, you know, changing you changes everything. And it makes perfect sense. If you even think of like a clock, the gears in a clock, right? If you take one of those gears and file off of one of the little prongs, it's not going to work. It's not going to turn right. Everything else is going to have to shift for that gear to be able to stay in that clock, right? So it's the same thing when we're changing us. The people and circumstances in our lives start shifting. They have to. If you're going to show up differently, they're going to have to change to be able to stay in communion with you, right? Talking to people about their pain, that I was used to doing. But I actually stumbled against this woman who was like, you really need to start telling people what you know. And so she's been very helpful in helping me gain some clarity around what I did naturally with people. Because I didn't have any language around it, right? Like, they'd just be in my chair and I'd be like, oh, we're having a conversation, blah, blah, blah. And they'd come back the next time and they'd be like, oh my God, that changed my life, right? And I'd be like, oh, really? Well, what do you want to do with your hair today, right? You know what I mean? It was like not a place where I put value, really. And I realized that, you know, as a child, you know, to be in dissidence like that, to where your body is doing one thing, you know, because, you know, your body's going to react. I don't care if you're 5 or you're 15 or you're 30. You know, if you're being touched, your body's going to react. So, you know, your body's reacting pleasurably. Your mind is screaming. And usually your words are very trying to, you know, nice, trying to talk them into, you know. So a child is going to create some sort of strategy to diffuse that, right? For me, it was diffusing the physical pleasure, right? You know, so that I could concentrate, right? So anytime my body would start to react in any sort of pleasurable way, up came monsters, right? Now, it took me it took me a life vibration back to, but you are speaking the opposite of that, right? So if you're growing up being this victim, it's not like you're going to leave and suddenly be this strong, upstanding person. You know, you're going to find somebody that's going to dominate you so that you can talk to them, which is really sad, right? It is really sad. Like, it's like, come on, let's learn this other language so that you can, you know, talk to this person over here, because you can't even receive it, you know? Suffering. So, you know, it just took me a while to really dismantle all that. I think I'm finally at a point where I can not get derailed by the interactions or the lack thereof. And, you know, it's kind of like that old crazy aunt that, you know, You don't want to kiss you. Somebody's like punching you in the face as they're saying they love you. Love means something different, right? You know, anger. Like I never allowed myself to get angry because anger meant violence, right? Right? So, you know, you just stuff everything because, whoa, you don't ever want to do that, you know?